Prediction season is officially here. These are my game-by-game predictions for the South Carolina Gamecocks in the 2024 college football season. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. We're brought to you by our friends over at SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com and use promo code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. That's SeatGeek.com, promo code SECU to get $20 off today. Year 4 of the Shane Beamer era in Columbia, South Carolina approaches. These are my game-by-game predictions for the South Carolina Gamecocks in the 2024 season as we pull up the schedule and each of my selections. And for all those taking an initial look at the schedule and saying, man, that schedule sure is a gauntlet, it's a tale as old as time. This year is nothing different from any other year that South Carolina has been in the SEC since 1992. Every single year, it's lather, rinse, repeat when it comes to difficulty of the schedule. But there is an immense amount of opportunity as well. You start out week 1, you ease into the 2024 season with that game against Old Dominion. Now, I'll say this. Week 1 is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen in week 1. We've seen Old Dominion before beat the likes of Virginia Tech and keep games close and pull upsets. I will say, guys, if you look at Old Dominion last year, one of the worst teams in college football, I know it'll be Lenora Sellers' first start as the quarterback there in Columbia. Again, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of new transfer portal guys. But South Carolina, I think, could things be a little bit uncomfortable at halftime? Maybe so, but I think the Gamecocks more than likely pull away. I think all those new toys on defense for Clayton White, I think they will shine in this game. The spread is 20.5. Does South Carolina cover? I don't know, but I don't think it'll even be as close as the score will indicate. I think the Gamecocks will make running the football a point of emphasis, getting that running game going, right? Using this as a game to tune things up before you dive into SEC play. So I think South Carolina does start 1-0. You beat up on Old Dominion. And I know some folks, again, are going to try to make something out of this. Maybe there could be some big-time upset. I don't see it happening. Even with some of the holes in the roster South Carolina may have, they're much, much better than an Old Dominion team that will come into Williams-Brice Stadium in week 1. Week 2, guys, I've deemed this as the most important game for both sides. Rarely do you get that, but that is the case when the Gamecocks will travel to Lexington, Kentucky to take on the Kentucky Wildcats. I think folks are going to be surprised how good Kentucky's roster is this year, right? I'm one of those out there. I'm a little bit higher on Kentucky than probably most. I think Kentucky's an 8-win team this year. You look on defense, 10 of 11 starters return, and they add Jamon Dumas-Johnson on the defensive side of the football at linebacker. Offensively, they've got some of the best weapons in the SEC at wide receiver and Barryon Brown, Dane Key. Big question for them, what is Brock Vandagriff, right? You've got Lenora Sellers against Brock Vandagriff. Sellers' first start in SEC play on the road. Most important game for both sides. I think Kentucky feels like they cannot lose another game to South Carolina. Mark Stoops has to have this one, and I think he will get it. I think South Carolina drops this game again. I think this game, guys, 50-50 game, could go either way, but it is massively important for the Gamecocks because I think, as you can see from the rest of the schedule and as we dive into it, if South Carolina is going to get to a bowl game, I think you have to win this game against Kentucky because I just don't see the wins piling up if you do not beat the Kentucky Wildcats in Lexington. But I don't think you do. I think Kentucky, again, really solid roster. I think they get the win in that one to drop Carolina to 0-1 in SEC play. Then you take on the LSU Tigers. If this were a night game at Williams-Brice Stadium, I'd give you much more of a chance. But a noon kick at Willie B, it's still a good environment early in the day, guys, but it's not the same. And that goes for virtually every single SEC environment. We talk about LSU. I mean, you could say for them as well, it's not the same at noon, obviously. So I think LSU defensively, what are they going to be? It's going to be really interesting. But I think top to bottom, the roster is still more talented and still better than South Carolina. I think LSU outscores the Gamecocks, and what I think will be an offensive shootout of sorts could be a great opportunity for Lenoris Sellers and that running game, which is going to be so key to get going. But I think LSU's just got too much. I think they'll go up and down the field in that one. I'm still kind of skeptical on what South Carolina will be defensively as a whole, and I think LSU will get the win in that one. Then you get a breath of fresh air. You take on the Akron Zips to move your record to 500 at 2-2. Now, here's where things really get real, because you enter the bye week on September the 28th, 2-2, 0-2 in conference play. And like I mentioned, schedule's difficult, but there's a lot of opportunity. But this month of October, guys, it's probably the most difficult October slate you're going to find in college football this year. Ole Miss at home, at Alabama, at Oklahoma. Let's start with that Ole Miss game. You talk about one of the nastiest, most hostile environments in college football this year. Folks, Juice Wells returning to Williams-Brice Stadium. His exit, if you did not follow along, was not exactly a peaceful one. It wasn't exactly a mutual separation, if you will. You know South Carolina fans are going to make Williams-Brice Stadium an incredible environment. This game an afternoon or maybe even a night game kick. With that being said, guys, again, the environment will be electric. It'll be one of the must-see games for that reason alone. My biggest thing with that, though, is this. Could an upset happen? I'm not saying it's completely off the table. But that goes away after a while, right? Like in pregame, as soon as the game starts, all that hostility, all that hype, South Carolina is going to be playing with an extra level of adrenaline. But then you start to play football. And it comes down to all that emotion and stuff is great, but it comes down to what's your roster? How do you match up? And I just don't think South Carolina matches up with Ole Miss, guys. I think defensively, Ole Miss is going to wreak havoc on that South Carolina offensive line. I think this is probably one of those games Lenoris Sellers is running around for his life. South Carolina, if they get stymied in the run game, they don't have a chance. Because you can't ask Lenoris Sellers to throw the football 30, 35 times a game like you did Spencer Rattler last year. You just can't do it. And then who are you throwing it to? Who's out there catching the football? So I just think, guys, top to bottom, there could be some really interesting moments early in this one. We'll see if Juice Wells is actually playing in the game. But even if he wasn't playing, I think Ole Miss top to bottom, guys, it's just a better roster. It's a better football team. Will be a great environment, at least early, but I think Ole Miss pulls away, and I think they win this game by double digits. I don't think this one's particularly close. At Alabama, the following week, like I mentioned, guys, I mean, the October slate is just brutal. It's a noon kick at Bryant-Denny Stadium. What is Alabama going to be this year under Kalen DeBoer? I think Bama's still going to be pretty good. I've got Bama winning this one. Again, I think it's another game where South Carolina probably falls by double digits. It's going to be a rough couple weeks in October, guys. It just is. I think on the lines of scrimmage alone, I think Bama's probably going to push South Carolina around. This will only be, the second road start in Lenoris Sellers' career, and it comes against the Alabama Crimson Tide. So good luck with that. Bama's still one of the most talented rosters in college football, guys. A lot of new things for them, obviously, with Kalen DeBoer, but I've got Bama as a college football playoff contender. I've got them winning double-digit games, and one of those is against South Carolina. The following week, you go to Oklahoma to take on Boomer Sooner. This one kind of interesting, right? Shane Beamer, who was an assistant coach at OU, he goes back to Norman. I think of the three in October, this is the one I think could be somewhat close. I think this one could be a one-score game. I think Oklahoma is going to be, no pun intended, one of those boom or bust teams where it's like, does it click that week? Does it not? They've got their own problems on the offensive line. Jackson Arnold, a very young, talented quarterback. I would say these two teams offensively are fairly similar. I think Oklahoma's got more top-end talent in regards to weapons. Like South Carolina doesn't have a Deion Burks. They don't have a Farouk at wide receiver. They don't have an Anderson at wide receiver. They don't have those guys. Maybe Rocket Sanders is equivalent to Gavin Sawchuk if he's healthy. I think that would be fair to say. But I think they have more weapons. But in regards to, you're not exactly sure what the offensive line is going to be. And very talented but young quarterbacks, there are similarities there. Defensively, I think I think you see them flex their muscles in this game. I think OU's elite defensively. Again, I think it could be tough for South Carolina to move the ball. I could see this being a little bit of a lower scoring game, actually, around that 24-17, 23-20 type of game. And again, I think of the 3 in October, this one more than likely is the closest. But I do think Oklahoma hands South Carolina the loss. 3 straight losses and an over October. Not going to be Cocktober this year. But here's the thing. Cocktober, I feel like it's kind of a myth. Because South Carolina under Shane Beamer's played their best football, not in October, in November. So you get the bye week on October the 26th, much needed. You get to lick the wounds. You rest. You recover. Here come the Texas A&M Aggies to kick off the month of November. Night game at Williams-Brice Stadium. It's homecoming. By this point, things should be clicking. You're going to know who you are for the most part as a football team. But offensively, the running game should get going. Offensive line should be gelling. Lenoris Sellers knows who he is. I'm sure some receivers you would think have stepped up on the outside. And defensively, this is where we saw South Carolina start to play much, much better late last year as well. And like I mentioned, here comes Texas A&M. And guys, South Carolina has one of these games every single year, it seems. You know, the running joke in Columbia is that South Carolina loses to someone they shouldn't and they beat someone they should. I'm not sure they're going to lose to anybody they shouldn't, but I think that game where the Gamecocks put it all together, it's the beginning of November. Lenoris Sellers and company. The offense is starting to find itself. The offensive line is gelling. Rocket Sanders and the running game is getting going, right? Probably somebody has stepped up at the wide receiver position. Defensively, this is where we saw South Carolina start to play their better football last year. And I think that's the case, guys. I think top to bottom, Texas A&M is probably more talented than South Carolina. But I think the Gamecocks at night at Williams-Brice Stadium, sandstorm gets going. You never know what's going to happen. I think Carolina puts it all together, plays one of their best games of the season. I think A&M going to be very up and down in year one of Mike Elko. They've got talent, but anytime you have a year one of a new head coach, it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride. And I think you're going to see that in this game. And I think South Carolina, after a winless October, coming off the bye week, there's going to be people questioning Shane Beamer and what's going down in Columbia. I think the Gamecocks get a much, much needed win under the lights. I think you see South Carolina play inspired, and I think you see them again get a much, much needed win over Texas A&M. Guys, the following week, I think South Carolina builds off of it. You got the Vanderbilt Commodores on the road in Nashville, and listen, at some point, this streak is going to get snapped, right? At some point, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen this year, though. I mean, guys, Vanderbilt is bad, and they're bad. They're not just bad, they're bad. The only way this thing kind of gets sideways and we could potentially see it become a fourth quarter game, because for whatever reason, if you look at the history of these two guys, they play close for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but the games have been closer than you would expect outside of, say, last year. And I think there was a game maybe 2 or 3 years ago that also wasn't all that close. But there's been a lot of close matchups. If you turn the football over and you're kind of playing sleepy on the road and Diego Pavia gets loose, maybe, but I don't see it. I don't see it. I think South Carolina makes it, 15 in a row over Vandy. It's been that long since the Commodores upset the Gamecocks. Don't think it's happening this year. I think South Carolina makes it for the first time all season, back-to-back SEC wins, which would set up a massive home showdown against the Missouri Tigers. This one, guys, this has been one of the most frustrating streaks of all for South Carolina. Because you ask any Gamecock fan, is South Carolina a better program than Missouri? Most of them are going to tell you yes. Whether they believe that to be true or not, they're going to tell you yes. And at some point, you have to ignore maybe what you think, and you have to look at what's happened on the field. And you have to look at where the two programs are on the field. And guys, right now, Missouri is a far superior program to South Carolina. Now, is this a winnable game for the Gamecocks? Absolutely. Because at some point, the streak will be broken. At some point, it's going to happen. But we've almost reached the territory, guys, that until we see it, I mean, who recalls 2 years ago when South Carolina entered the top 25 and Missouri was coming to town and they weren't all that great, and you're thinking, this is the year. And the Gamecocks played one of their worst games of the season and got trounced by Mizzou. Eli Drinkwitz owns South Carolina right now. And in turn, Mizzou owns South Carolina right now. So until we see otherwise, and I think Missouri is going to be a really good football team this year. They're going to have the weapons, I think, to go up and down on South Carolina. I don't know that the Gamecocks will be able to keep up. I've got Missouri getting the win here. And again, until shown otherwise, I don't know why you'd pick South Carolina in this game. I really don't. I really don't. Guys, the following week, though, South Carolina will have a chance to rebound, and they will as they take on Wofford out of the FCS. You know, the option could give you some headaches. You hate to have an option team the week before your rivalry game, but that's what you got. But I think South Carolina, either way, they'll run the football in this one. I think they'll pound the rock with Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, that entire running back group. And I think you see the Gamecocks get a fairly comfortable win to set up the rivalry game showdown at Clemson in Memorial Stadium. This game last year was one of the ugliest rivalry games we saw on rivalry weekend. I think 16-7, the final score. You go into this game seeking bowl eligibility. Could be a big one. That said, I don't see it happening. I think Clemson, guys, for all the joking and the jest and the making fun of for not using the portal, I think Clemson's roster is still far superior to what South Carolina will field. Will anybody be able to score touchdowns, get on the board in any way? Maybe. We'll see. It might be a little bit more entertaining than last year. You can only hope. But I think Clemson still got more than South Carolina. I could see this being close. I think maybe the days of Clemson winning this game by 3 or 4 touchdowns maybe is in the rear view. But I do think Clemson's going to be improved this year offensively. I think Cade Klubnik under Garrett Riley, year 2, I think they take a step forward. And I don't know that I can believe yet that South Carolina has the horses to keep up with Clemson. I don't know that they do. So for that reason, on the road too, which didn't matter in 2022, but who's going to step up and be what Spencer Rattler was for South Carolina 2 years ago? Who's Juice Wells 2 years ago? Who are the big heroes of the Gamecocks? I just don't know that even at that point late in the season, you have those guys. So I think Clemson gets the win, and South Carolina finishes their season 5-7. 2-6 in conference play for back-to-back 5-7 seasons, and what will set up a massive year for Shane Beamer's program in 2025. So, guys, when you take a look at South Carolina's schedule, do you agree with me? Do you disagree? How do you think the South Carolina Gamecocks will fare in the 2024 college football season? Guys, that's going to do all for me. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. Until next time, guys, I'm Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the other side.